Hello students, today we are going to study subject about probability, and in this subject we will discuss how the experimental probability is different from the theoretical probability. And we basically try to answer two questions. First, what does happen if we perform the experiment several times? And second one is what should happen if we perform the experiments? So in order to answer these two questions, we will look at the experimental probability and the theoretical probabilities. Let us suppose we toss a coin and we want to measure the chance of getting a head or a tail. So in order to measure those chances, we have two ways to approach or two ways to measure those chances. First, we perform the experiment several times and then obtain the possible outcomes. And the second one is record all possible outcomes and try to find out the chances based on those outcomes. So let us suppose we toss a coin several times and we want to measure the probability of getting a head. So let us suppose we toss a coin 5 times. So first time we get head, second time we get tail, then head, and then head, and then tail. So out of 5 times we perform the experiment, the number of times we get head is 3, and the number of times we get the tail is 2. So total number of times we perform the experiment is 5. Therefore, the probability of getting a head is equals to 3 divided by 5, which is the number of times the head has came out of the number of times the experiment is performed. The other approach is the probability of getting a head when a coin is tossed. There are only two possible outcomes when a coin is tossed. Either we will get a head or we will get a tail. So the total number of outcomes is 2, and out of which our interest is only 1. So the probability of getting a head is 1 upon 2. So this is our theoretical probability in which we look at the all possible outcomes and find out among those possible outcomes how many are our desired outcomes, and we take the ratio of these two to find the required probability. Similarly, in this case, we already have performed the experiment 5 times, and from that we calculate how many times we get the head, and we take the proportion of head and the total number of times we perform the experiment. So this is my experimental probability. And this is my theoretical probability. Okay, so let us look at the proper definition of these two. Experimental probability is also called the empirical probability, and experiments are performed for a fixed number of times and the outcomes are observed. Based on those outcomes, the probability of occurrence of an event is calculated. Suppose the probability of event is E, and we denote the probability of occurrence of an event E by PE, and which is equals to the number of times the outcome E has occurred divided by the number of times the experiments are performed. Okay, so this is my experimental probability. Similarly, if we look at the theoretical probability, it is the expected outcome of an event is obtained before performing an experiment. Suppose we are going to perform the experiment and we want to know what will be the possible outcomes. As we have seen, we want to measure the chance of getting the head or tail in the previous slide. So in that case also we obtain the total possible outcomes when an experiment is performed, and we obtain the favorable outcomes when the same experiment is performed. And from those we calculate the probability of getting an event E based on the possible outcomes. So the probability of getting E in case of theoretical probability is obtained by the total number of favorable outcomes divided by the number of outcomes. So in this case, we have a total number of possible outcomes. So total number of possible outcomes. Let us look at the examples. Consider the percentage of marks obtained by student in monthly unit test are given below. So we have a 5 unit test, and in each test we obtain the results and we have a marks. Our interest is to find the probability of getting the marks greater than 70. So our aim is to measure the chance of getting the marks greater than 70. So you can understand that the experiment is performed 5 times, the test has been conducted 5 times, and then from those results we try to measure the marks greater than 70. So this is empirical probability kind of questions, and that would be obtained by creating a table. So the possible outcomes are when the mass is greater than 70 and when the mass is not greater than 70. So when the mass is less than or less than 70, less than or equal to 70. And the number of times it has happened, that is frequency. So if you look at the marks, in the second test, it has got 71, in the third, 73, and in the fifth, it is 74. So total number of times the marks obtained greater than 70 is 3, and the marks less than or equals to 70 is 2. So total is equals to 5. So our answer is 3/5. Okay. So this is my experimental probability question. Now suppose a box contains 3 blue, 2 white, and 4 red marbles. If a marble is drawn at random from the box, what is the probability that it will be white, blue, or red? So you can see that the experiment is not performed, it is going to be performed, and our aim is to measure the chance of getting a white, blue, or a red. So total number of outcomes, total number of possible outcomes is equals to 3 plus 2 plus 4, which is equals to 9. And our interest is for white. So probability of getting white is equals to number of times you could get. The number of favorable outcomes is 2 divided by 9. Similarly, for blue, we have 3 blue out of 9 marbles, right? So we take the ratio of these two, and which will be equals to 1/3. And the probability of getting a red marbles is equals to 4/9. You can see that the number of favorable red ball is 4 out of 9 marbles. So which is equals to 4/9. 9. So you can see these two questions, that how the experimental probability and the theoretical probability is different. Thank you.